On a quiet night in May of 2013, a woman dropped off her rent payment and got ready for bed, ready to call it a night. She was caught on camera calm, alone, and unsuspecting. But by morning, she was gone, without a trace. What followed was a chilling case of trust betrayed, secrets hiding in plain sight, and a truth far darker than anyone imagined. Welcome to True Crime Stories. If you're new here, I'm your host, Ty Knotts, and I post new true crime documentaries every single week. We don't use AI narrations or a bunch of drama, we just get to the victims, their stories, and the details of the investigation. So if that's your sort of thing, be sure to subscribe, because that's pretty much all we do here. Maribel Ramos was a very headstrong and smart girl. She had dreams of working in law enforcement one day, but Maribel also had a very motherly nature, and she made sure to look after her siblings, since her mom worked 2 jobs. During high school, Maribel worked as a security guard at a local grocery store, and from there, her passion for a career in law enforcement took new heights. After graduating from high school, Maribel joined the US Army in 2001, and she was deployed to Iraq, given the events that transpired during that time. Maribel did 2 combat tours, and she was honorably discharged in 2008. But Maribel wasn't done. Her dream of becoming a police officer was still at the forefront. So after getting discharged from the Army, Maribel enrolled in California State University, Fullerton, and there she was studying criminal justice. She also got an apartment near the campus in Orange County. But at that time, her mom tragically fell ill. And Maribel stepped up and moved in with her mom and took care of her until a year later, when her mom unfortunately passed away. After being hit with this loss and grief, Maribel realized that she couldn't afford to pay rent all by herself, and she needed a roommate. She first asked her sister, Lucy, that she was settled with her kid and didn't want to move if she didn't have to, so Maribel took to the internet, in particular Craigslist, and put out an ad for a roommate, as so many people do. Soon enough, Maribel would come across a guy by the name of Kwang Choi Joy, or Casey Joy, and he seemed like the perfect fit. He was easygoing, he got along with everyone, and he was in his 50s at the time, and he had a 10-pound Yorkie, and they were looking for a place to stay while Casey found a job. Maribel and Lucy worked together to help Maribel pick a roommate, and after all was said and done, they chose Casey, and the 3 met up just to get to know each other in person, and by the looks of it, Maribel had found the perfect roommate, so it was a done deal. Maribel and Casey became roommates, and things were pretty smooth sailing as far as anyone could tell. Casey wasn't annoying, he didn't fuss over things, and he was pretty much the perfect roommate that Maribel could ask for. Maribel and Casey, since they were living together, became good friends too. They would hang out at the apartment, eat dinner together, walk their dogs together, and even go out frequently. They were roommates turned besties. But this happiness for Maribel was short-lived, because one day, without warning, she vanished. It was May 3rd, 2013, and Maribel's loved ones were blowing up her phone. It was actually Casey who called Maribel's sister, Lucy, to ask whether she'd seen her sister or not. Lucy first thought nothing of it, but when Maribel wasn't picking up her phone and she'd missed important appointments like a veteran event where she was supposed to speak, that was when everyone was on edge. She hadn't shown up for her classes either, which was way out of left field for Maribel. So, where was she? According to KC, Maribel's car was still parked at the apartment, and everything was locked up, and things seemed eerie and mysterious. Lucy and one of Maribel's cousins visited Maribel's apartment, and sure enough, it was exactly like how Casey explained, and they could even hear a dog barking inside. That was when the police were called, and Maribel Ramos was finally reported missing. When the police gained access to the apartment, they made their way straight for Maribel's bedroom, and while nothing was out of the ordinary, the bed was unmade, and a pillowcase was missing. This immediately stood out to Lucy because Maribel was in the Army, and she was very particular about making her bed and following a routine. She would make her bed first thing in the morning, so this was a very odd sight. Well, that was when the police jumped onto the case because this was not normal at all. The police wanted to find out what Maribel was doing the night before she went missing. The police first found out that Maribel had a boyfriend at the time, whose name was Paul Lopez, so they decided to bring him in for some questions too. In the meantime, the police checked surveillance footage, and almost immediately, they found what seemed to be the last sighting of Maribel. A day before she went missing, she was seen at the manager's office dropping off her rent check into a little wooden box. She was wearing a tank top and sweatpants, and it literally looked like she had no plans for the day. After this, it was assumed that she was making her way home to get some shut-eye. No one suspicious was following her, and Maribel looked calmed and not frightened at all. But if this was the case, where could she have possibly gone? By now, the police had their hands on Paul, her boyfriend, and they started asking him some pretty unusual questions about his relationship with Maribel. Paul claimed that he and Maribel weren't exclusive. They were seeing each other, but they were also seeing other people. Their relationship was very recent, so they hadn't really committed themselves to one another quite yet. When the police checked where Paul was at the time that Maribel was last seen, he was at work, and it was confirmed. Also, Paul didn't give off any weird vibes either. He was worried for Maribel, and was very cooperative with the police, and he told them the last time that he spoke to her was on May 2nd on the phone. But Paul did say something that steered the police's suspicions in a completely different direction. He was very wary of KC, Maribel's roommate, and the person who reported her missing. Well, to the outside world and to us, KC was the perfect roommate. But let's just say that that image would soon be altered to a great extent, because KC was definitely not a model roommate. In fact, Maribel and KC were having a ton of problems while living together. Maribel initially thought that she struck gold on Craigslist when she found KC as a roommate. And in the beginning, things were good. KC was just a lonely guy with no friends, and Lucy and Maribel kind of felt bad for him, so they began including him in family events as a way to help battle his loneliness. They could have never thought that things would take such a turn, though, because in KC's eyes, Maribel was the love of his life. He was instantly smitten by her. He fell head over heels for her so quickly and so hard that he couldn't see straight. He initially just wanted a roommate, but in his eyes, instead, he had found the love of his life. KC even talked to Lucy on the phone and professed his love for Maribel. He said he wanted to marry her and build a family and a home together with her. Lucy was left in a very uncomfortable position. I mean, sure, she liked KC, but never in her life did she see him as a potential brother-in-law. Lucy even called Maribel after the fact and spilled the beans. And to say that Maribel was shocked was an understatement. Maribel seriously never saw KC in that light. She genuinely thought she and KC were just good friends. That's all. It was a classic friend zone situation. Well, when Maribel approached KC and gently turned him down, he didn't put up a fight, but he did concoct a plan. He thought that he needed to try harder to charm Maribel. If only he could try harder and become the man that Maribel wanted him to be, then everything would fall into place, and he and Maribel would ride off into the sunset, living happily ever after. So KC started to change his appearance. He began working out more, he bought more stylish clothing, he got a tattoo to look more manly and rugged, and he allegedly got plastic surgery on his face, too, which cost him almost 10 grand. Basically, he was trying to morph himself into the guys he thought Maribel would be into. He also started to shower Maribel with gifts, expensive ones, and even promised to take her on a cruise trip for the holidays. It was clear by this point, KC was spiraling. He was so deeply in love with the woman who had the literal definition of zero interest in him. It was heartbreaking on the surface, but soon it just turned creepy. Now, making some changes for the person you love, that's amazing. You always hear people going on about never change who you are for anyone, live your truth, but that's such a load of crap. True love, honest love, is about compromise, change, and trying to be better not only for yourself, but for your other half. So it's amazing to see people making changes for the better in order to be better for the ones they love. But this is really only amazing when that love goes both ways. But that wasn't the case with KC and Maribel. He was pretty much forcing Maribel to like him back, and I guess it's safe to say that it wasn't working. Maribel didn't like Casey in that way, no matter how many tattoos he got, how skinny or baggy his jeans were, or what gifts he bought her. Also, Maribel was in a relationship with another guy, Paul. So obviously she didn't want to make things awkward. She just wanted Casey to be a good roommate and keep up his end of the bargain. But the thing is, Casey wasn't even being a good roommate at this point because he wasn't even paying his rent. He had thousands of dollars to spend on cosmetic surgery, tattoos, but not enough to pay his rent. Because of this, tensions got higher and higher, and suddenly Maribel went from loving Casey as a roommate to absolutely despising him because he didn't pay his rent. It was actually Maribel who once called Paul during an argument with Casey, and the call was on speaker. Maribel was very angry at Casey, and she kept telling Paul that enough was enough and she was going to kick Casey out. Maribel had been on Casey's back for the past few weeks now, demanding he pack his things and leave if he wasn't going to pay rent. And Paul even offered to come and help Maribel out if Casey was giving her any sort of trouble. Maribel refused, saying that she'd handle it on her own, and that was basically how the call ended. Then, the police discovered another chilling detail. It was a call made to 911 about 2 weeks before Maribel went missing. And the call was made by none other than Maribel, and on the call, you can tell she sounds scared and distressed. And to put it plainly, Maribel was scared of her roommate, Casey, and she wanted to have the whole occurrence documented. During that call, Maribel entailed that she was sick and tired of her roommate, and that she was afraid of him. It's assumed that during that argument, Casey did or said something to make Maribel feel nervous and scared, and now she was contemplating hurting Casey in an act of self-defense. If that's not a red flag, I don't know what is. Maribel had been having problems with Casey being very persuasive towards her. Then she made this very disturbing phone call, and now she's gone. The police were honestly stunned at how things turned out. They could have never even imagined that the very person who called and reported his roommate missing, acting like a concerned friend, had a really bad history with that missing roommate. So the police decided to call in Casey for questioning, and in the meantime, they also did some digging. The police found out that Casey claimed he'd moved from California to Tennessee to find work, and he had no social life or friends. So whatever he said about being easygoing, making friends with everyone on Craigslist, that was all a lie. And sadly, Maribel fell for it. It was revealed that after his parents passed away, Casey's life just spiraled out of control, and he was not on good terms with the rest of his siblings. He had an awful temper and would fly off the handle at the smallest of inconveniences. Casey's anger was unchecked to the point where his own sister had to get a restraining order against him. This was seriously mind-boggling. But he also had several other brushes with the law. In 1986, Casey was charged with battery and assault, and in 2011, he was arrested on suspicion of driving under the influence. So this was enough reason to call Casey in for a round of questions. And right away, the police noticed something weird. It was Casey's arms. They were marred with injuries. They were straight, clean, and abundant. The police almost immediately asked about these injuries, and, well, Casey had an explanation for them. Actually, he had a couple explanations because his story changed a lot. At first, he said that he got them when trying to save his dog from a thorny bush while out on a walk. But sometime later, he told the detectives that he got injured as a result of a fishing incident, where his arms got caught in the fishing line doing something. During the interview, Casey was calm and even laughed at some points. He kept reiterating the fact that he cared about Maribel very much and that she was his life, and that he wouldn't hesitate to give his life for hers. He just said it out of the blue and in no context to the actual question. It was really bizarre. He also mentioned not paying rent on time, and that was because he just lost his job. In fact, he told the police that Maribel was drunk last Friday night before she went missing, and she was acting really aggressively. Casey told the police that he tried to calm her down, but that led to a huge argument breaking out, and she just wanted him out of her home by the very next day. She also apparently threatened Casey that she was armed and that she didn't find him attractive. But again, this was really weirdly specific. But aside from that, Casey let the police take his DNA sample and pictures of his injuries, and even voluntarily handed over his phone and laptop for further testing. But it wouldn't be Casey's laptop that led to his ultimate undoing, but his own mouth. Now that Casey didn't have his phone or laptop with him, he started visiting the local library to post on Yelp, and he especially made an account with a profile photo of him and Maribel on a night out. He would keep himself updated with the latest news, and people were talking about the developments in the case. Basically, Maribel's family had spread the word of Maribel's disappearance all the way to Yelp. They wanted as many people to see the case and come forward with any information. And sure enough, this stirred the pot of conversation. People were throwing in theories, talking about what could have happened to Maribel and everything else about the case. Well, Casey also decided to join this forum, and he started commenting on Maribel's disappearance thread, and he said some really weird things. First, he went on and on about how Maribel was the only one for him, how much he misses her, how much she was his whole life, and how she was the sole beneficiary of his $250,000 life insurance policy. Bet you weren't expecting that. But people on Yelp, being smarter and sharper than Casey, caught on pretty quick. They almost immediately noticed that Casey was talking about Maribel in the past tense, whereas everyone else, like Maribel's loved ones and even strangers, weren't. Well, Casey quickly came to his defense and laughed the suspicion off, saying English wasn't his first language. And then in the next comments, he made sure to address Maribel in the present tense. He was also discussing what the police talked about with him and how his belongings were in their possession. This guy was seriously just laying it all out there. No boundaries, nothing. Just open for the world to see. It was just weird. I mean, it's one thing to clear up your name when you're being suspected, but what Casey was doing just rubbed everyone the wrong way. He definitely seemed super suspicious, and now that the police knew that he and Maribel were having a fight over rent money, and Casey being rejected by Maribel time and time again, a motive was clear as day. But they just needed that one piece of evidence that would explain Casey's involvement in whatever happened to Maribel. And soon enough, they found something. As you know, Casey didn't have his laptop or phone with him, as those were currently in the police's possession. Well, this left Casey with only one option: the local library, as mentioned a moment ago. Casey would be seen going to the library often, and on the computer there, he made some very disturbing searches. Now, the police were already tracking Casey's every move, so they decided to bug Casey's computer. Usually, in public libraries, the workers clear all of the activity of the person on the computer and then they just hand that computer over to the next user. But this time, the police asked the library employees to have Casey sit at a specific computer, aka the bugged computer. Basically, this little tweak allowed the officers to see Casey's computer screen in real time, and what he was doing without getting caught. It sounds similar to screen sharing, and how you can see someone working on their computer during digital meetings. But what the police were doing was some sneaky, undercover incognito work. Well, around that time, an awareness walk was being held by Maribel's family in her honor. It was going to be held at Peters Canyon in Tustin. Well, Casey logged into the computer, and at first, the activity was normal. Casey went to his social media, surfed for a bit, found some jobs, and even submitted an application for one. But after this, the police noticed something weird. Casey visited the Facebook page made for Maribel, and it was basically a page where all the updates, progress, and any events regarding Maribel's disappearance were going to be posted. Casey spent an unusually long time on that Facebook page. He was going through each post, probably checking how the case was unfolding, and that was when he came across the awareness walk in Peters Canyon. Mind you, the police are checking all of this in real time. Well, Casey opened another tab, and on it, he made a very disturbing search. To keep it PG, Casey basically searched for the timeline of decomposition. Clearly, he was calculating something, but what? The police were left shocked by this search, and as you all know by now, things probably weren't going to end well. Casey then closed all the tabs, but then he reopened Google Maps. And there, he dragged the map to a place where the walk was being held, and then after some time, dragged the map to a very remote area. It was very disturbing for the police to see this unfold. Why did Casey do that? What was in that remote place? They didn't want to wait any longer, so they assembled a team and went to the very place Casey was scanning at the computer earlier. It was Silverado Canyon, a place near Santiago Canyon and Jackson Ranch Road. and it was close in vicinity to the place where the walk was being held. The police searched the area, and sure enough, after a bit of looking, they found what looked to be disturbed or dug up dirt. The police were honestly dreading the next step, but if they needed to solve Maribel's disappearance, this was their only chance. So they got to digging, and within no time they found something. A body. Unfortunately, after digging up the remains the police had just uncovered, they were identified as Maribel Ramos through a tattoo on her back. But the problem was, it was the middle of May in California, and temperatures were scorching. And as a result of this, medical examiners couldn't determine Maribel's cause of death. But it was estimated that she lost her life on the same night that she was last seen. So the police called KC in for questioning once again, and this time they knew that they had their guy, and they grilled him with questions. But now, KC wasn't the all-smiles guy. He didn't like this change in attitude and pressure from the police, and he just stopped cooperating altogether. He asked to leave, and he did, until he was arrested on murder charges and brought back into the station just shortly after. Interestingly, when KC was arrested, he was wearing Maribel's military dog tags. This was something Maribel wore all the time, and now they were on KC's neck. It was safe to say that the investigators' eyes raised at this disturbing sight. And even though KC was in handcuffs, he still denied having any involvement in Maribel's case. So he was a lost cause. It was up to the detectives to come up with a timeline of what could have happened. They believe that after Maribel was seen dropping off her rent at the manager's office at around 10:30 p.m., she was in her sleepwear, and then she went back home where KC was still there. Then it's believed that an argument broke out about the rent yet again, and instead of having KC leave at the end of the month, Maribel wanted him gone the next day. At this ultimatum, KC felt this growing surge of anger. First, Maribel rejected him, and now she was kicking him out of the house. The police believe that when Maribel went to sleep, that was when KC acted on his evil plan. We don't know what he did, but in the end, Maribel, who was more than capable of protecting herself from an ordinary attack, couldn't save herself. Then KC disposed of her body in a shallow grave at Silverado Canyon. And to get to the area where Maribel was found, there was barbed wire. So the injuries on KC's arms could have been caused by that barbed wire, as well as Maribel's hands and fingers during the struggle at home. Even though there was no DNA evidence linking KC to the crime, it was a pretty strong case to convict KC of Maribel's murder. For example, if he didn't commit the crime, then how did he know where her body would be? In the end, KC was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 15 years. He still maintained his innocence until the end, even writing letters to the jury pleading for another trial, but his conviction stood as it was. This was such a tragic case. To think that Maribel, a seasoned Army veteran with great combat skills, was taken out by someone who took his obsession to the next level. Maribel didn't know that she was letting someone stay with her who would be a danger to her and her safe haven. And in the end, this was the very place where she was driven straight into the hands of death. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of True Crime Stories. If you like this video and want to see more, be sure to subscribe. It's totally free and just keeps you up to date with all my latest cases. Also, if you want to become a member of the channel, you'll gain access to new videos sometimes days or weeks before they're uploaded to the public. And it's a great way to support the channel and help out. I appreciate all of you guys that have decided to do that. And if you want to join, you can click that big join button below the video or find the link down in the description. Now, I know I mentioned it last week, but I just wanted to quickly mention it again. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to keep giving verbal callouts for channel members at the end of each video anymore. I'm trying to figure out a way around this, but YouTube has changed the way that they're displaying you guys' names now. And I can no longer see your actual names. I can only see usernames, and those are usually filled with numbers, characters, or they're just like a mixed match of words that I can't really pronounce. So if this is a deal breaker for a lot of you and you decide to cancel your membership of the channel, I totally understand. But do know that I will continue to show a credits list at the end of each episode, just like this, but any new members will have their username displayed instead of their real names, unless I can tell your real name from your username. It's a really strange change for YouTube to make, but ultimately, it's out of my control. But I appreciate each and every one of you guys so much, and I do hope that you will stay members. But don't forget, True Crime Stories t-shirts are also now available. You can grab one of those from a link down in the description as well. But as always, if you enjoyed this video, check out this other interesting case I covered. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.